Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to another lesson on control accounts, which is your chapter 8. Okay, so in our previous lesson we've talked about sales ledger control account. So today we're going to move on to purchases ledger control accounts. So sales ledger control account and purchases ledger is similar to each other, it's just from different perspective, such as that sales ledger obviously is from the sales perspective. So the debit and credit roll is the opposite for purchases ledger control accounts. So the lesson objective for today is similar to your previous lesson. So firstly, we want to understand the purpose of sales ledger and purchases ledger control account. We want to know why are we constructing these accounts, and then we also want to know how to prepare a purchases ledger and sales ledger control account, such as what items to include and how are the treatments of these items. So before we move on to purchases ledger, we want to skim through what we already know for sales ledger control accounts, so that we can apply the similar concept to purchases ledger control accounts. Okay, so sales ledger control account, what is the purpose, what is the function of a sales ledger control account? It is to check the accuracy of the sales ledger. So we want to know how accurate our sales record is. So how much goods have we actually sold, how much of these goods have been paid for, and how much have not been paid for. So the source document for sales ledger would be, firstly, the sales journal. It is where we record all your credit sales. So we want to know the total sales. And we want to know how much sales have we returned, so sales return journal. And we also want to know how much of these sales have been paid for. So we look at our cash book. So in other words, sales ledger control account is all the trade receivable account combined into one account. So instead of checking all individual trade receivable account, we compile it in a control account, and that's how we keep track and make sure that the sales ledger is recorded accurately. Okay, so an example of question, we've seen this, so I don't have to go through this anymore. Okay, so this is how a sales ledger control account would look like. It looks like a normal T account. It's just that the items included will be the total of each item and not individual items, such as individual sales from each trade receivable, but instead we take the total sales of the period. Okay, so let's move on to purchases ledger control account. So in purchases ledger control account, the function would be to check the accuracy of the purchases ledger. So how much goods have we actually purchased, how much of these purchases have we paid for, and how much do we still owe our trade payables. So the source document would be, firstly, where do we get our purchases amount? So our credit purchases amount can be found in the purchases journal. How much of our purchases have we returned? So we look at the purchases returns journal. How much of our purchases have we paid for? So we look at our cash book. So in other words, purchases ledger control account is all the trade payables accounts combined into one account. So instead of checking individual trade payable accounts, we compile it in the control account and we can check it from there. We check it through the total, so all of the amounts can add up. Okay, here is a different format of question for control account, or question on control account. So it says here, the following data relates to the accounts of trade payables for January 2018. So they've already included all the data you may need into one table. So instead of looking at all the different source document to find the information, they've already put it for you in one table. So all you have to do is just construct your purchases ledger control account, and you have to know which items will be included and are they credited or debited. So it's a much simpler version of a question on control account. Okay, so let's look. So here, required, construct the purchases ledger control account for 1st January 2018. So in our sales ledger, I started out with going through the debit side of the sales ledger control account, right? Because the balance BD was on this side, so I started with the debit side. So for purchases ledger, I'm going to start by going through the items we include in the credit side. Okay, so firstly, of course, we have the balance BD. So this balance BD is given to you here. It says balance for trade payables at 1st January. So 1st January will be the first day of the period, the starting balance, the opening balance, sorry. So this is the balance BD. Okay. Next, we have our purchases amount. It's also credited because it increases a trade payable account. So it is on the credit side. So this is also can be found in your table. Here they give you the credit purchases amount. Okay. But what happens to the balance CD? We don't need to use it yet because that is how you find if your recording is correct. So let's look at the debit side now. We have our purchases on the credit side. Now we want to know how much of these purchases have we returned. So we debit the purchases returned. This amount is also can be found in the table given. And then we want to know how much of these purchases have we paid for. So we look at the cash book, which is the payment made to credit suppliers. So this is the payment that you have made. How much purchases have you paid for? And then we also have the discounts received. How much discount have we been given by our trade payables? This is also given in the table. Okay? And then once all of the information have been recorded, then you close the account by putting down the balance CD. So usually we would check that the balance CD is equal to the total of the balance CD of individual trade payables accounts. But now, since they've already given you the balance CD, we check if the total for each side of the account, the debit side and the credit side, totals to each other. If it doesn't total, then you probably have recorded an item on the wrong side of the account, or you have miscalculated it, or you have written down the wrong amount. Okay? So that's simple, right? So here is a summary of items that should be included in the sales ledger control account. So the first 6 items is what you normally, the first 5 items, is it 5 or 6? 6, sorry. The first 6 items are the items that you normally find in a control account. Let's look at the sales ledger control account first. So you always have the opening balance. Obviously, some accounts may not have an opening balance if you already paid for everything last period, but typically most accounts have an opening balance, which is your balance BD. For sales ledger, it will be on the debit side of the account because it is similar to a trade receivable account. And then we have the credit sales on the debit side as well. And then we have the sales return, and then we have the payment received, and then we have the discount allowed and closing balance. So the next 3 items is what may appear in your accounts. For example, we have the dishonored check. So if you paid for something, but the payment if your trade receivable paid you, but the payment does not go through, so you have to debit it back into your account. So dishonored check is recorded on the debit side. And then we have irrecoverable debts. Irrecoverable debts is when your customer goes bankrupt, so they can't pay you anymore, or they run away, so you won't be receiving any money from them. So you remove this from your sales ledger. So what you do is you credit it. Next one is interest on overdue accounts. So when you have late payments, when your customer has late payment, you might charge them interest. So this will increase the amount they owe you, so it will be debited. In the purchases ledger as well, the first 6 items are the items that you can typically find in the purchases ledger. So the opening balance is the balance BD, credit purchases, purchases returned, payment made to supplier, and discounts received, and then you have the closing balance. And another item that may or may not appear in your purchase ledger is the interest. So when you have late payments to your supplier, they might also charge you interest for that. This will increase the amount you owe to your trade payables, so it will be on the credit side of the control account. Okay, so let's just summarize that, and from all the information I've given you, you can probably already guess what are the uses of control counts. So firstly, it is used to check the arithmetical accuracy. So is your calculation correct? Are the amount recorded correct? Maybe you have written 6 as 0, 0 as 6, so that is an arithmetical error as well. And it may also be able to help you to find or calculate missing figures. Maybe you lost a receipt and you don't know how much did you pay your trade payable. So the control account may help you, or maybe you just forgot to record a transaction. So control account may help you do that by looking at the bigger picture. It may also help you to detect theft or fraud. So when, for example, let's just say your employee has received payment from your trade receivable, but they did not record it. So if you look at an individual trade receivable account, you may not find anything suspicious or anything wrong with the accounts. But when you look at the whole picture, you might notice that the sales ledger do not tally with the control account. So control account in that sense may help you to detect theft or fraud. Okay, so that's all for your control accounts. I'll give you an exercise on Saturday that you can do. Okay, all right, thank you so much.